Hey, Tyler for Lover, my name is Crip, my pronouns are he, him, and welcome to Star Legacies, where we are highlighting a bunch of great folk doing amazing work out in Texas. And today I'm talking to Adrian Cardwell from Badger Pride, and they're also involved in Irving Pride too. So let's get them on the line. I hope everyone's doing well. Oh, here we go, Badger Pride, I see you. And did that go through? Yeah.
Oh, there we go. Can you hear me
Yes,
okay?
I can. How are you, Adrian?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Oh, I'm hanging on by a thread, but we're gonna be okay. We'll be all right.
I
Oh,
understand that.
yeah. I mean, we'll get through it together. How about that?
That's right. That's exactly right.
Yeah, yeah. So, let's get started talking about your your work in Badger Pride because that started like during COVID, right? During the
It did.
pandemic. So
It
prior
did.
to that, you were in the corporate world for a long time. What inspired that shift?
Well, it was funny thing. So during my corporate career, I really had the privilege to lead a lot of large teams and do a lot of really good kind of complex work, including efforts to expand broadband access across the nation because and that was important to me because I'm a firm believer that internet access is a fundamental right, and so I was proud to be able to be part of that. But what I found myself craving kind of towards the end there was really a deeper connection to my personal values. And so when COVID hit, the entire world had to stop, right?
Yeah.
And it forced all of us to pause, and it gave me a lot of time to reflect. And so, I asked myself whether, my day-to-day work truly aligned with the values that I care about, and the answer was no. Um, and at the same time, we were seeing, and we're still, seeing this today, this rapid escalation of anti-LGBTQ legislation around the country. And so I had spent the better part of 30 years building this collection of artifacts that now has over 10,000 artifacts in it. And the question I was asking myself was, so it's like, so what? You built this amazing collection. What are you going to do about it? And I was reminded of a question that Harvey Milk asked the community before he was assassinated. He said, "How can people change their minds about us if they don't know who we
Mm.
are?" And so then I started thinking about how do I help answer that question? First, ask it and then answer it, right? And it was quite literally in the middle of rural England, along Hadrian's Wall, where the realization came. Was like, do something that form an organization where you can create programming, create exhibits, and really take this history deep into the community. And I think that helps me use a lot of the skills that I honed over the course of my career,
Yeah.
like strategic planning and relationship building and public communication. And so that sort of melded with my passion for preserving and celebrating queer history. And so it kind of feels like a culmination of everything that I've done. But this time the work feels like an authentic extension of who I am.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the thing, right? Because it's something that you love, you have the foundation right there. It wasn't like you had to go too much further to get up. Well, I'm sure it was a lot of hard work, but as far
Yeah.
as like the concept and what you love doing, like you didn't really have to go far, right?
Yeah, no, it was, I would say I'm not a trained historian, right? And so this is a new field, but it's been just tremendous to kind of pivot very quickly into this work. It's been great, and the community has been very responsive to it, and we've been able to have a lot of inspiring conversations with folks right now all around North Texas, but starting conversations with folks outside
Yeah.
as we look to how do we expand our work.
Oh, I'm so curious, like what got you off on that hobby to begin with? Like, how did you first start collecting these artifacts?
Oh, absolutely. Well, yeah, so I mentioned started over, 30 years ago at this point. I was a young gay thing in college, and there were no queer history classes. And at that time, it was hard to find books in the library,
Yeah.
and so I did manage to get my hand on some books and did some old school sleuthing. I would see names in a book and would call up directory assistance 1411. If anybody remembers what that was, you're talking to an operator at the phone company, and they're giving you people's contact information. And so I started contacting people, cold calling them, or writing them a letter. And sure enough, people started responding. These activists that go all the way back to the Stonewall, and a lot of them have passed since then, but they've been integral in connecting me to these artifacts and saying, hey, here's this young person who is really passionate about understanding this community that he's a part of, and they were just sending me things. And so 30 years later, here we are, 10,000 objects. It's so wild.
Yeah. Gosh. And do you have a favorite artifact, or can you name what the first one was, or?
Yeah, so what's funny is the first one that I got, that I sourced myself was, I was a college student in Lubbock, Texas, at Texas Tech University, and I'd come up to Dallas to have a weekend, and there was a bookstore right at the crossroads of Throckmorton and Cedar Springs. It was like the big kind of gay bookstore in the neighborhood, and I popped in there and I picked up a little button that said "Hate is not a family value." Was not overtly queer, but that was my first one. And then I bought a set of they called them freedom rings, and they were these aluminum rings of the rainbow that were on a chain around the necklace. That was the first thing that I ever bought. And funny enough, it hung in my closet for another 2 years before I would come out of the closet myself and
Oh.
wear them out with pride. I would say one of the artifacts in the collection that really touches me and moves me. And I will tell you, by the way, you see this mess here behind me. We're building an exhibit, so it's a wild mess back here. But I think one of my favorite objects in the collection, and if you can see this is this tiny little wooden token here. See if I can get it closer here. This is from the Upstairs Lounge in New Orleans, and it was a gay bar in the French Quarter of New Orleans. And on June 24th, 1973, it was a subject of an arson attack, and it killed 32 patrons in there that day. And so this is one of only a few pieces of that that place that exists still to this day. Until the Pulse massacre in 2016, it was the most significant attack on our community for decades. And so that is a thing that deeply resonates with me and still moves me to this day.
Yeah. I mean, speaking of like Pulse, and then did you say it's called the
It
Upstairs
was
Lounge? Was that was?
called the Upstairs Lounge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So those are two, like, well, I'd imagine in New Orleans, like it's communities of color, right? Black and brown
Yep.
communities down there.
Exactly.
What what are the challenges that come up in terms of archiving, artifacts from our communities?
Yeah. Well, the thing is, the very nature of privilege in the past and still to this day has dictated whose stories get told and whose stories get preserved, right? And so I think the challenge, the chief challenge is, how do we address really kind of the gross disparity in what is contained in any archives, right? Because the archives and museums, this is true around the world, but in particularly true here in the United States, is it's a very top-down approach where the government and the institution, which is frequently an institution of higher learning, dictates what gets preserved and what doesn't, what makes it to the collection and what doesn't. And I think as a result of that, there's been a tremendous sense of distrust that has calcified amongst communities, coast to coast. And so I think the challenge is, number one, for a community to recognize that their history is worth preserving, it is worth celebrating, and it is worth cherishing and sharing. And so I think that's kind of the key thing is, and this is the grassroots approach that, we take here at Badge of Pride, and that, that will be really kind of centered to our conversation at the Southern Regional Gathering is, what are the tools, what's the language that we can provide to the community so that they can capture their own history and tell their stories on their terms. And then when you do that, when you have more people doing the work of history, then that gives you the opportunity for collaboration with other history groups. And so we can build, cross-cultural experiences, that comes together organically, right? And so I think the challenge first and foremost is for a community to recognize that that they are a part of history, and their history deserves to be preserved and shared. And that's step number one. And then step number two is giving them the tools to do that work themselves.
Yeah. Sorry. So you're saying you want to empower communities to like believe that their histories are worth telling, or we're educating like the institutions.
It's both. It's both
Yeah.
ways, right? Yeah, I think I wouldn't use the term empower, actually, because I don't want to imply that the power isn't already there, right?
Mhm.
So, but I think sometimes helping folks have the tools and the language to do the work of history, to do the preservation work, and then once that is established and folks believe that, hey, we have a history that is worth preserving and celebrating, the institutions will follow. But what we can't do is wait for the institutions to acknowledge that, oh, you know what we're
Yeah.
missing is that,
You'll
is
be waiting
XYZ
forever.
history.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll be waiting forever, right?
Yeah. Sweet. So, NKP is a Asian and Pacifica organization. Can you tell us some of the figures? Because, I imagine there isn't as large a community as some of others. So, who are some highlights that you can mention, or some artifacts that you'd like to name?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start with one figure that I think doesn't get a whole lot of attention, and and this goes all the way back to the 1950s, and this was a Filipina lesbian. Her name was Rosalie. Rose is what she went by, Bamberger, and she was one of probably the central figure that started the first lesbian organization in the United States, the Daughters of Bilitis. So they were formed in 1955. And this was, she and her partner organized these first meetings in their home in the San Francisco area. It's kind of funny. There's a funny story. I think when you look up the Daughters of Bilitis, there are a couple of names that immediately get associated with the organization. And the first, kind of the chief among them, is Phyllis Lyon, who became the president of the group later on. But she got this call from Rose saying, "Hey, do you want to come be a part of a group of six of us that are putting together a secret society for lesbians?" And Phyllis was like, yes, because that would mean we immediately know 5 more lesbians, right? I mean, that's how grassroots this was. And it took, kind of the vision of Rose and her partner and these first handful of women to put together the Daughters of Bilitis that, still today, they sort of set the stage for a lot of the activism that happened in the 60s and on into the 70s. So she is a central figure, the attention that she deserves and that she earned, right? I think in terms of some artifacts from the community, a couple that I'm really, really excited about, and that you'll get to see when you come to, if you're able to get to Dallas for the exhibit, is a couple of buttons. They're just small buttons, but they're from the marriage equality referendum in Taiwan in 2018. It sadly failed on kind of a 2-to-1 margin. But you think of, in a community where there's probably where harmony is more the focus and privacy is more the focus, that kind of the bravery that it took to wear a button just kind of out in the public to proclaim, hey, I want you to support me and I want you to support this marriage equality referendum. That is just a thing that it resonates with me, because it's such a bold statement, right? And you look back into the early parts of the 1970s of the gay liberation movement here in the United States. Those people really put themselves on the line, right, to wear something publicly that declared who they are. And so those are some items that you'll see in the exhibit related to Taiwan. And I even got another little thing here. This is I don't know, kind of hard to see, but this is like a towel, like an athletic towel, celebrating Taiwan being, here we go, that's probably a little easier, being the first country in Asia to recognize marriage equality for its citizens. So a really, really cool thing.
Yeah. So the badge of pride isn't exclusive to the States, then there's artifacts that come from everywhere. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Oh,
I mean, those early conversations, they were connecting me with people all around the world. So yeah, our collection spans the globe and goes as far back to about 323 BC is the oldest object that we have in our collection.
Far out. And so
Yeah.
you started this collection, and then you were kind of a big part in starting Urban Pride too, right?
That's right. Yeah, that's right. There are other people who started it. We are going to be the the primary. We're going to be the nonprofit. We're going to benefit from it.
Yeah.
And so really what you think about is more pride in more places, right? That's really what we're all about, right?
Yeah.
And so this kind of came together, I think fairly quickly, that they want to put on. It's sort of evolved a little bit from a festival, like a traditional Pride setup, and it's now more of an entertainment program this first year. And so, it's really about how do we create more spaces for more of us to get together and celebrate who we are, right? And to connect with each other. And I think especially now, just kind of given the climate in this country right now and in other parts around the world, this community, this sense of community is a thing that we really have to cultivate. And I think the more opportunities that we have to come together and recognize that we are all a community and that it's going to take all of us to kind of get through this together is ideal. And so and what I'm excited about this particular event is that it's not in June. So it's because everybody's calendar is packed in June, right? It's nobody's got time
for the rest of the year.
Exactly, you're right. So this one here in North Texas in Irving is happening on April the 12th. And so it kind of gets the season started before it gets too hot here in North Texas, and so people can go out and have a good time, and they can find kind of the entertainment lineup and all the tickets over at irvingtxpride.com.
Cool. And how's that been, like, just kind of getting a gauge of how everyone's feeling in the community? Like, how's that going?
Yeah, what's been interesting is when it was first announced, I heard from people saying, "What, Pride, Irving? Question mark? What do you? How is this happening?" And so I think there is a tremendous appetite and desire for this, and if you're familiar with the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, it's very, very large. We're very spread out, and so it gives more people from more parts of the community to come in and gather.
Yeah. Okay, sweet. And then as far as doing the archives and that, what would you say to people who are like, oh, that's old, it's like younger people coming up? How do you encourage them to get involved in and kind of really appreciate the the beauty that is,
Yeah.
history.
No, that's right. I would say first and foremost to everybody is kind of two things. One is everybody, that's watching us here today, or maybe watching a video later. All of us make history every day by thriving in a world that has consistently tried to erase us,
Mm.
right? So that's first and foremost. And then the second thing I would say is that this history is it's your inheritance, and it's also your fuel, right?
Mm.
To propel you forward. So, you think about what we're witnessing in our nation today. We are witnessing an active campaign of erasure in this
Mm.
country, right? You just look at what happened on February 13th, just last month, where our national monument, our community's national monument, the Stonewall National Monument, the National Park Service scrubbed the trans and queer community from the public record. Not just in our own, not just in our own historical site, but everywhere
Mm.
throughout the government, right? And so even if it doesn't feel urgent and necessary now, there's going to be moments in your life when you're going to want and need examples of courage, of resilience, and of community. And that's what our history offers.
Mm.
We have proven this time and time and time again. And by preserving these stories, you ensure that the next wave of activists and artists and leaders have the foundation that they need, right? It's not just about nostalgia, it's about protecting our future by honoring the lessons of our past. And
Mm.
so that's kind of how I would encapsulate that.
Yeah. I mean, when I think of my ancestors, like, if they could do all that, like, I definitely have that in me, right? Oh
That's
gosh.
right. Yeah.
Yeah. And this speaks to like what your workshop's about at the upcoming Southern Regional Gathering, right? Convening.
That's
So can
right.
you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, that's the other thing, a real quick thing that I would say here is as kind of you think about what are kind of some of the lessons of queer history. I think the number one lesson to remember is that progress is not a given, and
Mm.
progress is fragile. It's not inevitable, and it can be taken away. And
Mm.
so it is something that we have to fight for, and something that we have to continue to protect,
Yeah.
right? And so when we think about what we're wanting to accomplish in the workshop is really to really underscore the fact that storytelling is one of the most powerful ways to bridge generational and cultural gaps
Mm.
in the queer community, right? So when elders share their experiences, whether about coming out in a different time or in a different place, fighting for rights, building chosen families, they provide younger folks with historical
Mm.
context, right? And a sense of continuity, right? Okay, these folks have gone through this. This is what I'm going through now, and kind of learn those lessons. And then likewise, younger queer folks, they bring fresh perspectives, right?
Yeah.
And new struggles and evolving forms of activism. The way that people can engage in activism today is very different than what our community had in the 90s, 80s, and 70s, right? And so, it can inspire and energize those who came before them. So the older folks and say, like, look what these young people are
Yeah.
doing. How amazing is that, right? And when you think of cross-cultural backgrounds, that storytelling allows us to see both our unique struggles and our shared resilience, right? And it reminds us that while our paths may be different, we're all part of the same ongoing movement
Mm.
for dignity, for visibility, and equality. And so when we come together for the convening, the workshop is really going to be talking about, let's identify the ways in which institutionally stories, histories, communities have been excluded from the cultural record
Mm.
and the historical record, rather. And then we talk about a history from below,
Yeah.
right? So earlier we're talking about how the government and the institution says what's important. This is how we flip the script on that, and we say this is important. And then we'll talk through some practical examples of how to capture an oral history, how to preserve those things that are maybe in the back of your closet or tucked away in an attic or in the back of the drawer, right? To recognize these things have historic importance. And then we'll talk practical ways of how you gather that information and build a community archive. And that's kind of the long and short
Yeah.
of what we want to accomplish in the session.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, even for myself, I have a very limited understanding about archiving and all those sorts of things that you do in Badger Pride. But for me, I think it is so important to educate people on how this impacts us today, and I really think that you as someone who's outside of our communities, that's great that you're helping break down the gatekeepers and how
That's right.
they really leave us out a lot and aren't letting us into these spaces, right? So yeah, just want to say appreciate the work you're doing and we're excited to have you out at the convening.
Thank you so much. I am thrilled to have this opportunity because what we need is more people, more communities doing this work of history, of capturing their history, and it's something that I'm passionate about, and I want to give everybody the tools to go forth and do that
Yeah,
work.
yeah, sweet. So everybody make sure you follow Adrian on Badger Pride. And yeah, is there anything else you want to let people know before we go?
No, I mean, I think that's great. So please, yeah, follow us on at Badger Pride right here. You see our account. You go to badgerpride.org and keep up with our work there. And I invite everybody to come to Irving Archive and Museum. We're opening our exhibit on June the 6th, and it will run all the way through the end of September, September 28th, 2025. So a good long run. And you'll be able to experience more than a century of queer history with those artifacts right there in front of you.
Sweet. And just a real quick question: how much of those would you say as part of your personal collection, like from when you first started?
I mean, almost all of it
Yeah,
is from what was my personal collection that is now Badger Pride's collection.
yeah,
But we've also been able to collaborate with other organizations. So there are, North Texas is fortunate in that we have multiple queer history organizations here in the area that are community archives.
yeah.
So there's the Dallas Way in Dallas. There's the Yesterqueer LGBTQ History Project in Tarrant County, and so we're borrowing artifacts from them as well as other national folks around the country that are lending things to us. So it's going to be really, really cool. And when we open, it will be, by every account I've been able to find, this will be the largest exhibit on queer history ever mounted in the state of Texas.
Oh,
So
sweet.
it's tremendous.
Yeah, well, congratulations,
Thank you.
and we will see you in Dallas.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much. Have a great day, everybody.
All right,
Thank you.
take care.
Bye
See you.
bye.
Thanks, James.
Thank you.